What happens when a simple act of prejudice at 30,000 feet collides with unimaginable power? We've all heard stories of airline passengers being mistreated. But this isn't one of those stories. This is the story of a woman who was publicly humiliated, kicked out of her first-class seat, and made to feel like a criminal on a flight she paid for. But the flight attendant, full of smug satisfaction, had no idea who she was messing with. She wasn't just kicking out a passenger. She was sealing her own fate and the fate of the entire airline. Stay with me for a story of karma, so swift and so absolute, it will leave you breathless. The hum of the Boeing 777 was a familiar lullaby to Dr. Alani Williams. It was the sound of transition, of moving from one high-stakes environment to another. Dressed in a simple but elegant charcoal grey cashmere tracksuit, she was the epitome of understated wealth. No flashy logos, no ostentatious jewelry. Her only accessory was a vintage Patek Philippe on her slender wrist and a well-worn leather-bound book in her hand. Her hair was styled in intricate shoulder-length locks, each one a testament to patience and time. At 42, her face was serene, marked by the quiet confidence of someone who had built an empire from the ground up, not inherited one. She had booked seat 2A in the first-class cabin of Prestige Air Flight 715 from New York to San Francisco. It was a last-minute trip to finalize the acquisition of a promising Silicon Valley tech startup, a deal her firm Elysian Ventures had been cultivating for months. She preferred to fly private, but a mechanical issue with her Gulfstream had forced her onto a commercial flight. An inconvenience, but nothing more. Alani settled into the plush leather pod, the personal space feeling like a small sanctuary. She accepted a glass of water. No champagne, as she had a full day of negotiations ahead, and opened her book, sinking into the world of historical fiction. The boarding process was a chaotic ballet of clanking roller bags and muffled announcements. Alani was an observer, detached and focused. That is until a shadow fell over her page. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice was sharp, laced with a cloying sweetness that didn't reach the eyes. Alani looked up into the face of a flight attendant who seemed poured into her uniform. Her name tag read Brenda. She had perfectly coiffed blonde hair, an immaculately painted red smile, and eyes that were scanning Alani with an expression of polite yet firm disbelief. "Yes." Alani's voice was low and calm. "I think you may be in the wrong seat," Brenda said, her smile tightening. "Economy class is further down the back of the aircraft. I can help you find your seat if you're lost." The assumption was so blatant, so steeped in prejudice, it was almost cliché. Alani felt a familiar, weary sigh build in her chest, but she suppressed it. She had dealt with this her entire life. The doorman who assumed she was a delivery person at her own penthouse. The salesman who directed her to the costume jewelry counter. The conference organizer who mistook her for a keynote speaker's assistant. She maintained her placid expression. "No, I'm quite sure this is the right seat. 2A. She gestured to the boarding pass resting on the console next to her. Brenda glanced at it, but her eyes flickered back to Alani's tracksuit, her elox, her very presence. The data from the boarding pass didn't seem to compute with the biased image in her head. "This is a first-class cabin, ma'am. These are our most exclusive seats." "I'm aware," Alani replied, her voice still even. "I purchased one." A passenger across the aisle, a man in a shiny suit named Kyle, who had been loudly boasting about his sales figures on his phone, snorted audibly. "Probably used her boyfriend's points," he muttered to his companion, just loud enough to be heard. Brenda's smile became a mask of condescending patience. There might have been a mistake in the system. Sometimes upgrades don't process correctly. If you'll just show me your ticket again, I can sort this out for you and find your actual assigned seat." The emphasis on actual was like a small, sharp jab. Alani slowly picked up her boarding pass, the crisp paper a stark contrast to the simmering frustration within her. She held it out. "The name is Dr. Alani Williams. The seat is 2A. The ticket was purchased this morning. There is no mistake." Brenda took the pass, her manicured nails tapping against it. She scrutinized it as if it were a forged document. She looked from the pass to Alani, then back again. Her mind was made up. This woman did not belong here. It was a simple, ugly fact in Brenda's world. The tracksuit, the casual demeanor, it didn't fit her mental image of a first-class passenger. She saw a freeloader, a system bucker, not a titan of industry. "I'm going to have to verify this with the gate agent," Brenda said, her voice now losing its false sweetness and taking on an authoritative edge. "Please gather your belongings. You can wait in the galley." Alani did not move. She placed a bookmark in her novel and closed it gently. "That won't be necessary. You can scan the pass right here. You'll see it's valid." "Ma'am," Brenda's voice dropped, becoming a stern stage whisper. "We have other passengers to board. If you don't cooperate, I will have to consider you a disruptive passenger, and that is a very serious matter. Now please, come with me." The confrontation was no longer private. The other first-class passengers were now openly staring, some with discomfort, some with detached curiosity, and Kyle with a smug, vindicated smirk. Alani felt the familiar heat of public humiliation, the sting of being judged not by her character or accomplishments, but by the color of her skin and the preconceived notions of a stranger. But beneath the sting, something else was beginning to form. Not anger that was a fleeting, useless emotion. It was something colder, harder. It was resolve. Brenda had no idea the chain of events she had just set in motion. She thought she was just putting someone in her place. She didn't realize she was grounding an entire airline. Brenda returned not with a gate agent, but with the lead purser, a stern-looking man named David. His face was a canvas of weary authority. Brenda stood slightly behind him, a look of righteous validation on her face. "Ma'am, Brenda tells me there's some confusion about your seating." David began his tone attempting diplomacy but failing to hide his annoyance. "There is no confusion on my part," Alani stated clearly, her gaze steady. "I am in seat 2A, which corresponds to my boarding pass under the name Dr. Alani Williams. Your colleague seems to believe I don't belong here." David glanced at the boarding pass Brenda was still holding. "Well, let's just clear this up. We have a manifest. Brenda, did you check the manifest?" "I was about to," Brenda interjected quickly, but the passenger was being uncooperative. It was a blatant lie. Alani hadn't raised her voice or moved from her seat. She had simply refused to be dismissed. Kyle, the businessman across the aisle, decided to insert himself again. "She was being difficult, David. I saw the whole thing. Brenda was just trying to do her job. Probably one of those upgrade scams you read about online." David's expression hardened. The word of a man in a suit, another legitimate first-class passenger, seemed to cement his opinion. He turned his full attention back to Alani. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to deplane so we can sort this out at the gate. We can't hold up the entire flight for this." The request was so outrageous, so disproportionate, that Alani felt a moment of genuine disbelief. "You want me to deplane for sitting in the seat I paid for? Are you serious?" "It's just to verify the ticket," David said, his patience wearing thin. "If it's all in order, you can get back on." "And if the doors are closed by then?" Alani countered, her voice dangerously quiet. This is a deliberate attempt to make me miss my flight. I have a legally binding contract with this airline represented by this ticket. You are in breach of that contract." The mention of a contract and legal terms gave David a brief pause, but Brenda, sensing hesitation, jumped in. "She's threatening us, David. She's becoming aggressive." The weaponization of words was insidious, uncooperative, difficult, aggressive. Alani, who had remained perfectly still and spoken in measured tones, was being painted as a threat. It was a classic ugly script, and she was being forced to play a role she had not chosen. The captain's voice crackled over David's radio. The delay was attracting attention. After a hushed, one-sided conversation, David's face was grim. The decision had been made from above, based on the filtered, biased information from his crew. "Ma'am, the captain has been informed of the situation," David said, his voice now devoid of any pretense of politeness. "You have two choices. You can accept the seat we have available for you in economy, or you can be removed from the aircraft by airport security. The choice is yours. We are closing the doors in 2 minutes." The ultimatum hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Every eye in the cabin was on her. She saw pity in some, contempt in others, and cold indifference in most. To fight further would mean being dragged off the plane, a scene that would undoubtedly go viral. Her face plastered across the internet, stripped of context and dignity. It was a battle she could win in court, but a war of public perception she would lose in the moment. Her mind, a finely tuned instrument of strategic thinking, weighed the options in a nanosecond. The meeting in San Francisco was critical. Missing it was not an option. Humiliation was temporary. A failed 9-figure acquisition had lasting consequences. With a profound, soul-deep weariness, Alani nodded once. "Fine," she said, the word tasting like ash. "I'll take the economy seat." A wave of relief washed over Brenda's face, replaced by a triumphant smirk. "Very good," she chirped, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'm sure you'll be much more comfortable back there." Alani rose slowly, gathering her book and small handbag. She didn't look at Kyle, who was now openly grinning. She didn't look at the other passengers, who quickly averted their gazes ashamed or simply eager for the drama to end. She only looked at Brenda, locking eyes with her for a brief, intense moment. Alani's face was unreadable, a placid mask, but her eyes held a fire that should have been a warning. It was the look of a predator marking its prey. Brenda, however, saw only victory. Alani walked the length of the plane, the so-called walk of shame. She passed the premium economy section and entered the cramped, bustling main cabin. A junior flight attendant, a young woman with kind eyes, who had witnessed the exchange with visible discomfort, led her to the only available seat, 28B, a middle seat, next to the lavatories. As Alani squeezed past her new seatmates, a family with a crying baby, and buckled herself in the indignity of it all washed over her. The smell of disinfectant from the nearby toilet, the sticky armrest, the lack of legroom. This was her punishment for the crime of being a black woman in first class. The plane began its taxi to the runway. Brenda's voice came over the intercom, cheerful and professional, as she began the safety demonstration. Alani leaned her head back against the seat, closed her eyes, and took a single, deep, cleansing breath. She let the hurt, the anger, the humiliation flow through her, and then out. Those emotions were fuel, and she never wasted fuel. She pulled out her phone, paid the exorbitant fee for the in-flight Wi-Fi, and the screen lit up. The humiliation was over. The reckoning was about to begin. Her fingers began to fly across the screen, not to a customer service complaint form, but to a secure messaging app connecting her to her Chief of Staff, Marcus Thorne. Her first message was simple and chilling. Marcus, we have a new priority. Liquidate 500 million from the short-term treasury fund. I want to know everything about a company called Prestige Air and its parent holding company. I want a complete financial workup. Debts, assets, major shareholders, vulnerabilities. I want it in 1 hour. A reply came back in seconds. Understood. Is there a problem? Alani looked out the small, scratched window as the plane lifted into the sky, leaving New York behind. She typed her reply. They made one. The atmosphere in seat 28B was a chaotic symphony of human existence. The baby next to her wailed intermittently, a tiny engine of despair. The man on her other side was already snoring his head, lolling onto her shoulder every few minutes. The air was thick with the scent of microwaved meals and stale coffee. It was a world away from the serene, champagne-scented bubble of first class, where Brenda was likely fluffing pillows and offering warm nuts to Kyle. Alani was oblivious to it all. Her phone was her war room, the glowing screen, a portal to her empire. Marcus Thorne, her Chief of Staff, and a former Wall Street analyst with a mind like a steel trap, was flooding her secure inbox with data. Prestige Air was, as Alani had suspected, vulnerable. Very vulnerable. The first file was a top-line summary. Prestige Air was a subsidiary of Global Air Holdings, GAH, a publicly traded company. GAH had been struggling for years. They were saddled with an aging fleet, crushing pension obligations, and several recent quarters of missed earnings. Their stock price was languishing, making them a prime target for an activist investor or a hostile takeover. They had recently been downgraded by Moody's. It was a house of cards waiting for a gust of wind. Alani's fingers danced across the screen, firing off instructions. Marcus, contact the team at Goldman Sachs. Use our emergency advisory line. I want to know who holds the largest blocks of GAH stock. Institutional investors, mutual funds, rival airlines. I want a list of the top 20 shareholders and their positions. Get our legal team online. I want a full review of GAH's corporate bylaws regarding hostile takeovers. Look for poison pill provisions, staggered boards, anything designed to fend off an acquisition. Wake up the European team. I want them to start quietly buying GAH shares on the open market as soon as the London exchange opens. Don't create a spike. Small, steady purchases through multiple brokers. Mask our identity. Use the shell corporations we set up for the Zurich deal. The messages were fired off with cold, clinical precision. There was no rage in her keystrokes, only strategy. This was not a petulant act of revenge. It was a calculated business decision, a problem to be solved with overwhelming force. The disrespect she had endured was simply the catalyst, the spark that ignited a mountain of dry tinder. The core issue, as she now saw it, was a corporate culture so rotten that it allowed prejudice to flourish as company policy. A fish rots from the head down, and Alani had decided to buy the whole fish. An hour into the flight, a detailed report from Marcus arrived. It was worse than she thought. The CEO of Global Air Holdings, a man named Richard Sterling, was an old guard executive resistant to change and widely criticized for his exorbitant salary while the company floundered. The board was stacked with his cronies. Employee morale was at an all-time low, with union disputes and high turnover rates. A recent article in the Wall Street Journal had called the airline a relic flying on fumes. The largest shareholder was a venerable but conservative pension fund that was growing increasingly impatient with Sterling's leadership. The second largest was a rival budget airline, which had been slowly accumulating shares, likely testing the waters for their own takeover attempt. Alani saw her opening. It was a narrow window, but with enough capital and enough speed, it was more than enough. She initiated a video call with her core team, Marcus, her head of legal, and her chief financial officer. They appeared in small boxes on her phone screen, their faces serious. They were used to these sudden high-stakes calls. "Good morning," Alani said, her voice a calm whisper, incongruous with the baby crying beside her. "Change of plans for the week. The Silicon Valley deal is on hold. Our new target is Global Air Holdings." There was a moment of stunned silence. Her CFO, a man named David Miller, blinked. "Alani? Gah! That's a $10 billion market cap. It's an airline. We're in tech and biotech. We're in the business of identifying undervalued assets with poor management and unlocking their potential," Alani corrected him gently. "And I have just experienced their poor management firsthand. This isn't just an acquisition. It's a restructuring, a fumigation." She laid out her plan with breathtaking speed and clarity. They would not go the slow activist investor route. They would launch a tender offer, a direct appeal to the shareholders to sell their stock to Elysian Ventures at a premium price. It was aggressive, expensive, and incredibly fast. "David," she commanded, "I want a tender offer drafted, 20% above yesterday's closing price. That should be enough to get the pension fund and the other disgruntled shareholders to jump. Marcus, you will be my proxy. You will reach out to the pension fund's board directly. Let them know a change in management is coming. A real change. Our rival will either have to enter a bidding war they can't afford or sell us their stake. Either way, we win." "This is incredibly aggressive, Alani," her head of legal, Sarah, cautioned. "The GAH board will fight us tooth and nail. They'll use the press, they'll call us corporate raiders." "Let them," Alani said, a flicker of a smile on her lips. "They think this is about money. They don't understand. I'm not just buying a company. I'm buying a stage." As the flight crew began their descent into San Francisco, Alani sent her final set of instructions. She arranged for a car to meet her on the tarmac, bypassing the terminal. She instructed Marcus to leak the news of the impending takeover bid to a select few journalists at Bloomberg and Reuters, timed for exactly 1 hour after she landed. She wanted Richard Sterling to read about it on his phone, completely blindsided. The plane's wheels touched down on the runway. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off, as the other passengers began to stand and grab their bags. Alani remained seated, her work done for now. She had just set in motion a multi-billion-dollar corporate raid from a middle seat in economy, all while flying on the very airline she was about to conquer. She watched as Brenda and the other first-class attendants prepared the front door for deplaning, their faces cheerful, completely oblivious to the financial hurricane that was about to make landfall. Brenda caught her eye for a second, as Alani eventually filed past, a look of faint, dismissive recognition in her eyes. She had already forgotten her. Alani thought, "You won't forget me for long." The moment Alani stepped off the jet bridge and into the terminal, the carefully constructed world of Prestige Air began to fracture. Brenda, David, and the rest of the crew were going through their post-flight routines, chatting and laughing near the gate counter, waiting for their paperwork. Kyle, the smug businessman, was standing nearby, loudly closing a deal on his phone, eager for everyone to hear how important he was. They all saw her emerge from the jet bridge. A few, including Brenda, shared a subtle, knowing smirk. There she was, The woman from economy probably heading to the baggage claim to wait for a shabby suitcase. But she didn't turn towards the main concourse. Instead, she stopped and waited. A gate agent called out, "Mr. Sterling, please. A message for Mr. Richard Sterling." A portly man in an expensive but rumpled suit, who had been sitting in seat 1A and had been treated like royalty by Brenda, looked up in annoyance. "Yes, what is it?" He was Richard Sterling, the CEO of Global Air Holdings, on his way to a golf retreat. He had been on the same flight, completely unaware of the drama in his own first-class cabin. Before the agent could reply, the scene transformed. From a side door leading to airport operations, a group of 4 individuals emerged, moving with a speed and purpose that made everyone else in the gate area seem to be standing still. They were dressed in impeccably tailored dark suits. The leader of the group was Marcus Thorne, Alani's chief of staff. He was flanked by 2 senior lawyers from a top San Francisco firm and a personal security detail. They didn't break stride. They walked directly to Alani. "Dr. Williams," Marcus said, his voice crisp and clear, handing her a tablet. "Everything is in motion. The initial wire transfers are complete. Goldman is on standby." The entire gate area fell silent. Brenda's smile froze on her face. Kyle stopped his phone conversation mid-sentence. Richard Sterling, the CEO, looked on with a mixture of confusion and irritation. Who was this woman, and why was she being met by a team that looked like they were about to execute a corporate coup? Alani took the tablet, her demeanor shifting in an instant. The weary, humiliated passenger was gone. In her place stood a commander, a queen taking possession of her court. She scrolled through the screen, her expression sharp and focused. "Good," she said, her voice carrying in the silent terminal. "Did you manage to get a preliminary response from the CalPERS pension fund?" "They're ecstatic," Marcus replied, a thin smile on his face. "Their chairman said, and I quote, 'It's Christmas in September.' They're ready to sell their entire 12% stake the moment the offer goes public." Richard Sterling's face went from ruddy to pale. He knew exactly what CalPERS was, and he knew what a 12% stake meant. He started to walk towards the group, a sense of dread dawning on him. "Excuse me," Sterling blustered, trying to project authority. "What's all this? Who are you people?" Marcus turned to him, his expression one of polite dismissal. "Mr. Sterling, I believe you'll be hearing from our legal team shortly. I'd advise you to contact your own." Sterling looked at Alani, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He had seen her on the flight, in the back. He had walked past her on his way to the lavatory. His mind, slow and reeling, couldn't connect the dots. Alani looked up from the tablet, her eyes finally settling on Brenda, who was standing paralyzed by the gate counter, her face a mask of utter disbelief. The condescension and smugness had evaporated, replaced by a raw, naked fear. The world had just been turned upside down, and she didn't understand how. Alani then turned her gaze to Richard Sterling. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words were quiet, but they cut through the air like shards of glass. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I am Dr. Alani Williams, founder and CEO of Elysian Ventures. This morning, I had a profoundly disappointing customer service experience on one of your aircraft. It led me to believe that your company suffers from a systemic cultural rot, likely stemming from complacent and ineffective leadership." Sterling's jaw went slack. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Then it buzzed again, and again. He pulled it out. The screen was lit up with headlines from Bloomberg, Reuters, and the Wall Street Journal. Breaking Elysian Ventures launches $12 billion hostile takeover bid for Global Air Holdings. Activist investor Dr. Alani Williams targets ailing Prestige Air parent Co. after poor customer experience. Gas stock soars 18% in after-hours trading on takeover news. Sterling looked from the headlines on his phone to the calm, composed black woman in front of him, the woman his crew had banished to the back of the plane. His world tilted on its axis. He finally understood. Alani gave him a cold, dismissive glance before turning to her team. "Marcus, have the car brought around. I have a board to replace." As her entourage swept past, leaving a trail of stunned silence, Alani paused for a fraction of a second beside Brenda. She leaned in close, her voice a barely audible whisper for Brenda's ears only. "I believe you said I would be more comfortable in the back. I want you to think about that on your flight back to New York. Consider it a career development exercise. Think very, very hard about how comfortable you are right now." Alani walked away without a backward glance, leaving Brenda standing in the ruins of her own making, the full, terrifying scope of her mistake finally crashing down upon her. She hadn't just insulted a passenger. She had insulted her new boss and the owner of the entire airline. The week that followed was a masterclass in corporate warfare executed with the speed and precision of a special forces operation. While Richard Sterling and the GAH board were scrambling to assemble their defense, Alani was already 10 steps ahead. They were playing checkers. She was playing three-dimensional chess. The GAH board's first move was predictable. They issued a press release calling Elysian Ventures' offer opportunistic and inadequate, urging shareholders to reject it. They adopted a poison pill defense, a mechanism designed to dilute the shares and make the takeover prohibitively expensive. It was a textbook move, and Alani's legal team had anticipated it. They immediately filed a lawsuit challenging the poison pill, arguing that the board was not acting in the shareholders' best interests, but was merely trying to entrench itself. Simultaneously, Marcus was on the phone day and night, not just with the CalPERS pension fund, but with every major institutional investor on their list. His pitch was simple and devastatingly effective. Look at the last 5 years of GAH's performance. Look at the stock price. Look at their declining market share. Richard Sterling has driven this company into the ground. Dr. Williams is offering you a 20% premium right now to get out from under his failed leadership. Or you can stick with him and watch your investment continue to dwindle. The choice is yours. It was an easy choice. One by one, the big funds privately pledged their shares to Elysian Ventures. While the financial battle raged, Alani focused on the narrative. She gave a single, exclusive interview to a respected financial journalist. She didn't mention the incident on the plane directly. She was far too savvy for that. Instead, she framed the takeover in the language of value and principle. Global Air Holdings is a company with a proud history and dedicated employees. She said her image broadcast across every financial news network. But it has lost its way under a leadership that has fostered a culture of complacency and disrespect. A company's greatest asset is its people and its customers. When you disrespect, either you rot the foundation of your business. We see tremendous untapped value in GAH, but it can only be unlocked by a complete cultural and operational overhaul, starting from the very top. Her words were a dog whistle to every disgruntled employee and every dissatisfied customer of Prestige Air. The story of her poor customer experience had already leaked in vague terms through airline industry blogs, and her public statement gave it a powerful, credible context. She was positioned not as a vengeful billionaire, but as a visionary leader and a champion for the customer. Inside GAH headquarters, it was chaos. Richard Sterling was apoplectic, holding furious meetings where he yelled at his executives and lawyers who could offer no viable defense against Alani's multi-pronged assault. His allies on the board were getting nervous. Their phones were ringing off the hook with calls from furious shareholders demanding they accept the offer. The final nail in the coffin came 4 days after the flight. Alani, through her brokers, had acquired the 9% stake owned by the rival budget airline. They had seen the writing on the wall. They knew they couldn't win a bidding war against Elysian Ventures' deep pockets, and decided to cash out with a handsome profit. With that purchase combined with the pledged shares from the pension fund and other investors, Alani now controlled over 40% of the company's stock. It was over. Checkmate. The GAH board convened an emergency meeting. Faced with overwhelming shareholder pressure and the threat of crippling lawsuits, they had no choice. They voted to accept Elysian Ventures' tender offer. Richard Sterling was to be terminated immediately with a severely reduced severance package as negotiated by Alani's legal team, who cited gross mismanagement. 7 days after Brenda Jenkins decided a black woman didn't belong in first class, Dr. Alani Williams officially became the new owner of Prestige Air and its parent company, Global Air Holdings. Her first act as owner wasn't to celebrate. It was to send a company-wide memo. The subject line was, "A New Era of Respect." The memo announced a mandatory all-hands town hall meeting to be held in 2 days at the airline's main hub at JFK Airport in New York. The meeting would be broadcast to every employee across the globe. Attendance for all New York-based flight and ground crew was compulsory, including, of course, the crew of Flight 715. Brenda Jenkins read the memo on her company-issued tablet, a knot of ice forming in her stomach. She had been living in a state of surreal dread for a week, hoping the story would just go away, hoping the new owner was too busy to notice one insignificant flight attendant. But she knew. Deep down, she knew her judgment day was coming. The JFK hangar was vast, a cavernous space usually reserved for servicing 747s. Today, it was filled with over 2,000 Prestige Air employees, pilots in crisp uniforms, gate agents in their company blazers, mechanics in greasy coveralls, and a sea of flight attendants, including Brenda Jenkins and the purser David. They stood in nervous, gossiping clusters under the harsh fluorescent lights. A large stage had been erected at the front, with massive screens on either side. The atmosphere was thick with anxiety and speculation. Brenda stood with a few of her senior colleagues, trying to project an air of calm she did not feel. She hadn't slept properly in a week. The whispered rumors were flying. The new owner was a ruthless corporate raider. Heads were going to roll. "It's just corporate speak," one of her friends whispered. "They all say this stuff about new eras and culture change. Nothing ever really changes." Brenda nodded, wanting desperately to believe it. But she couldn't shake the memory of Alani's whispered words at the gate in San Francisco. "Think very, very hard about how comfortable you are right now." The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. Marcus Thorne walked onto the stage. "Good morning," he began. "On behalf of Elysian Ventures, I want to thank you all for being here. Our founder, the new owner and chairwoman of Global Air Holdings, Dr. Alani Williams, would like to speak to you." He gestured to the side of the stage, and Alani walked out. She was not in a cashmere tracksuit today. She wore a sharp navy blue power suit, her locks styled in an elegant updo. She exuded an aura of absolute, unshakable authority. She walked to the podium, placed her hands on either side of it, and surveyed the thousands of faces looking up at her. Her gaze was intense, sweeping across the crowd. For a moment, Brenda felt those eyes land on her, and her heart hammered against her ribs. "Good morning." Alani began, her voice calm, but amplified by the powerful sound system echoing through the hangar. "My name is Alani Williams, and as of 72 hours ago, I own this airline." She let that statement hang in the air. "Many of you are nervous today. You're wondering what my plans are, if there will be layoffs, if your futures are secure. I am here to tell you that my plan is not to shrink this company, but to grow it. My plan is to invest in new aircraft to improve our services and to make Prestige Air the most respected airline in the world. But for us to get there, we first need to have a conversation about respect." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd again. Respect is not a slogan you print on a poster. It is not a box you check in a training seminar. It is the fundamental principle of service. It is the belief that every single person who steps onto our planes, regardless of what they look like, what they wear, or what seat they are in, deserves to be treated with dignity. And somewhere along the way, this company lost that. The hangar was dead silent. "I'm going to tell you a story," Alani continued. "Just over a week ago, a woman boarded Flight 715 from here to San Francisco. She was a passenger in first class, seat 2A. She was a black woman, dressed casually. And from the moment she sat down, she was treated not as a valued customer, but as a suspect." Brenda felt the blood drain from her face. David, standing a few feet away, went rigid. Everyone who had been on that flight knew exactly what she was talking about. Their colleagues in the crowd began to look around, murmuring, trying to figure out who she was referring to. "A flight attendant." Alani's voice grew colder, more precise. "Decided based on nothing more than her own prejudice that this woman did not belong. She challenged her ticket. She publicly accused her of being in the wrong seat. She called over her supervisor, who without any proper investigation sided with his employee and the word of another passenger who made a snide, racist comment." The camera zoomed in on Alani's face on the big screens. Her expression was like granite. This passenger was given an ultimatum: move to a middle seat in economy at the back of the plane, or be forcibly removed from the aircraft by security. To avoid missing a critical business meeting, she endured the humiliation and moved. She flew for 5 hours in a cramped seat by the lavatories, while the people who mistreated her enjoyed the comforts of the front cabin. She paused, letting the weight of the story settle over the crowd. The murmuring had stopped. There was only a shocked, tense silence. "That passenger," Alani said, her voice dropping slightly, "was me." A collective gasp swept through the hangar. It was a sound of thousands of people connecting the dots at once. Brenda felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. It wasn't a story. It was a testimony. And she was the villain. "This was not about a seat on a plane," Alani declared, her voice rising with controlled power. "It was about a culture that empowers an employee like Brenda Jenkins." She said the name. The name echoed through the hangar. A spotlight operator, following a prearranged instruction, found Brenda in the crowd and illuminated her. She was trapped in a brilliant white circle of shame, thousands of eyes now boring into her. She wanted to evaporate, to abuse her authority, a culture that allows a purser, David McMillan. A second spotlight hit David, who looked like he had been turned to stone, to fail in his duty of care and oversight, and a culture that allows a passenger, a Mr. Kyle Stevens of the firm Synthocorp. Kyle wasn't there, but his name and company were now on the record broadcast to the entire airline. to participate in the harassment of another customer without consequence. Alani looked directly at the two spotlights. As of this moment, Ms. Jenkins and Mr. Macmillan are terminated from this airline effective immediately. Security will escort you off the premises. Your final paychecks will be mailed to you. Brenda's legs gave out. She stumbled, caught by the person next to her. Her face a grotesque mixture of shock and despair. David just stood there, his face ashen. Two security guards began to make their way through the stunned crowd towards them. Let me be perfectly crystal clear to every single person here. Alani's voice boomed. This is the new standard. There is a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind at this airline effective now. Not on paper, in practice. It doesn't matter if you're a pilot, a gate agent, or a baggage handler. If you treat a customer or a colleague with disrespect based on their race, their religion, their gender, their orientation, or their appearance, you are finished. There will be no second chances. She wasn't finished. As for Mr. Kyle Stevens, my office has already contacted the CEO and the board of his employer, Syntho Corp. We have informed them that unless he is held accountable for his behavior, Global Air Holdings and all its subsidiaries will be terminating our multi-million-dollar corporate travel account with them. We will also be sharing the details of this incident with our new partners in the industry. The message was brutally clear. The karma wasn't just for employees. It extended to anyone who thought they could get away with such behavior on her airline. This is not the company we are going to be. Alani concluded, her voice now softening, becoming inspirational. We are going to be a company built on a foundation of respect. We will invest in new mandatory training programs for every employee designed by leading experts in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We will promote from within, based on merit, not seniority or prejudice. We will become an airline that people are not just comfortable flying with, but proud to work for. She looked out over the sea of faces now looking at her, with a mixture of fear, awe, and for many a dawning sense of hope. The rot was being cut out. This was truly a new beginning. The work starts today, she said. Let's get to it. She turned and walked off the stage, leaving behind a hangar filled with the thunderous silence of a world that had been irrevocably changed. The months that followed the town hall were not a period of quiet consolidation, but of radical, relentless reinvention. For Dr. Alani Williams, buying the airline was the easy part. Transforming its very soul was the true challenge. She was not a distant owner ruling from an ivory tower. She was on the ground, a constant presence in hangars, break rooms, and boardrooms, her sharp suit and clear vision becoming a familiar sight to everyone from the baggage handlers to the senior pilots. Her first act was to tear down the old corporate structure. The executive floor, once a bastion of old guard, backslapping cronies, was cleared out. In their place, Alani installed a dynamic and diverse leadership team. Her new head of operations was a woman who had pioneered logistics for a major global shipping company. Her chief marketing officer was a young visionary who understood that modern branding was about authentic storytelling, not just slick advertisements. The new head of in-flight services was a former purser who had worked his way up over 30 years, a man who understood the crew's challenges and the passengers' needs from first-hand experience. The promised training program was Alani's signature initiative. She personally vetted the consulting firm that designed it, rejecting a dozen off-the-shelf corporate packages. The result was the Ascend method, a mandatory 3-day immersive experience for every single employee. In one simulation, a veteran pilot with a flawless record was put in the role of a non-English-speaking passenger trying to navigate a confusing connection. He later admitted, his voice thick with emotion, that for the first time in his 40-year career, he understood the profound anxiety many travelers face. In another flight, attendants role-played scenarios involving passengers with disabilities, disruptive children, and hidden anxieties, learning to see the human being behind the seat number. The training was grueling, emotionally taxing, and utterly transformative. It weeded out those who were unwilling to adapt and galvanized those who were committed to a higher standard. Simultaneously, Alani's capital infusion was a tidal wave of renewal. The name Prestige Air was officially retired in a public ceremony. The new name, Ascend Airlines, was unveiled emblazoned on the tail of a brand-new Airbus A350. The livery was a brilliant deep blue, fading into a sunrise orange, at the tail a visual metaphor for a new dawn. The old restrictive uniforms were replaced with stylish, practical designs created by a rising star in fashion, offering options that were comfortable and professional for all body types and genders. Employee morale, once a festering wound, began to heal. The renovated crew lounges the higher wages, and a new merit, not just seniority promotion policy created a palpable buzz of optimism. The story of the takeover became an industry legend. At first, Wall Street analysts were skeptical, calling Alani's massive spending a vanity project. But then the numbers began to tell a different story. Customer satisfaction scores, once languishing in the industry's basement, skyrocketed to number 1. Ascend Airlines began sweeping industry awards for Most Improved Airline and Best Cabin Crew. Corporate accounts, including many who had fled Prestige Air's shoddy service, came flooding back, drawn by the new reputation for excellence and social responsibility. Alani had proven her thesis in the most irrefutable way. Respect wasn't just good ethics, it was a killer business model. For the architects of Alani's humiliation, the world had become a cold and unforgiving place. Kyle Stevens was a corporate ghost. Fired publicly by Synthocorp, his name became toxic, a shorthand in his industry for arrogance and catastrophic misjudgment. He lost his high-paying job, his expense account, and the respect of his peers. David McMillan, the purser, found himself unemployable. The story was too well known. No major airline would risk hiring a supervisor with his record. He eventually took a job managing security for a suburban shopping mall, trading the skies for the endless sterile corridors of retail. Brenda Jenkins experienced the most visceral form of karmic justice, blacklisted and disgraced. She spiraled, eventually landing a job at a cut-rate car rental agency at a dusty regional airport in Arizona. Her life became a monotonous loop of processing paperwork under the flickering fluorescent lights of her sad little kiosk. Every day, through the smudged glass, she watched planes take off sleek modern jets, sometimes bearing the sunrise logo of Ascend Airlines. Each one was a dagger in her heart, a gleaming symbol of the life of travel status and security she had contemptuously thrown away. One sweltering afternoon, a successful-looking black woman in a beautiful linen suit approached her counter. Brenda's hands trembled as she took the woman's driver's license. For a terrifying second, she thought the woman looked familiar, and her entire body went cold with dread. It wasn't Alani, but the encounter left Brenda shaken, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The smug superiority that had been her armor was gone, replaced by a permanent gnawing anxiety. This was her prison, not one of bars, but of regret, endlessly watching others ascend to the life she had lost. 6 months after the town hall, Alani Williams was on a flight to London. She was in seat 2A. The cabin was a quiet hum of contentment. She watched her crew, a diverse and polished team, move through the aisles with an easy grace and genuine warmth. They anticipated needs, offered extra pillows, and spoke to passengers with an unforced kindness. This was the culture she had built. A young flight attendant named Jasmine, whose braids were adorned with subtle silver clasps, approached her. "Dr. Williams, it's an honor to have you flying with us today," she said, her smile reaching her eyes. "Can I get you anything before we depart? I see you're reading Ken Follett. I loved his Pillars of the Earth trilogy." The small personal comment was everything. It wasn't scripted. It was a moment of human connection, the very thing that had been so absent on Flight 715. It was the result of training, yes, but also of a culture that encouraged its employees to be their authentic selves. "Thank you, Jasmine," Alani replied, her own smile effortless. "I'm always impressed by his research, and a glass of water would be wonderful." As Jasmine glided away, Alani settled back into the plush leather of the seat, her seat in every sense of the word. She thought about the journey. The sting of humiliation had long since faded, replaced by the profound satisfaction of creation. She hadn't just destroyed the old. She had built something new and better in its place. She had turned a painful experience into a positive force that had improved the lives and careers of thousands of people. Her victory wasn't in Brenda's downfall, but in Jasmine's ascent. Looking out the window, she watched the ground fall away as the powerful engines lifted the aircraft into the vast open sky. It was more than just a flight. It was a vindication. On Ascend Airlines, in a world she had remade, everyone had the chance to soar. She opened her book, the quiet hum of the plane, a lullaby of her own making, and began to read. And that is the incredible story of how one woman turned a moment of profound humiliation into a legacy of lasting change. It's a powerful reminder that the person you look down on today might just be the person signing your termination papers tomorrow. Dr. Alani Williams didn't just get revenge. She got justice, and she used her power not just to punish the guilty, but to uplift an entire organization and create a better environment for thousands of employees and millions of passengers. It shows that true power isn't just about having money, but about having the vision and courage to use it to right a wrong. If this story of ultimate karma and righteous transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button to let us know. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that karma is always watching. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you never miss another story of justice being served. What did you think of Alani's actions? Was it the best revenge story you've ever heard? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. Thank you for listening.